when you can identify where you're wrong, it means because you're looking for where you're wrong. You're trying to find the flaw in your own argument, in your own truth, if I could put it that way, because your ultimate care is for the truth.
Hey guys, welcome back to No Experience Required.
It's great to be here again.
It is. My name is Steven, here along with
Chase, and we're here with our guest co-host, Ryan.
Yes, Ryan.
Ryan.
Yep.
Ryan.
That's me, Ryan.
He's back.
Ryan.
I'm back.
He's back. For those of you who don't know, we've had Ryan on before, and he's a guest favorite. He's one of our most listened to
I don't think that's true.
Shh, they don't need to know that.
Oh,
I'm just trying to sell ourselves. Also, we want to thank you guys for getting us to 1 million
subscribers
and 1 million plays and downloads.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
None of this is true, which is kind of perfect for the start of this episode.
But one day
That's
it will
what
be
I
true, and then we can just go back and listen to this.
That's what I'm doing.
Just creating
Just
our
claiming it.
Yeah, you're just. What is that? Manifesting it?
You're manifesting.
Yeah, there you go. Oh,
It's
yeah,
good to
last
be
time.
here.
Yeah, we've had some, we had a good topic with you last time, and it sounds like we're going to have another really interesting, it's really different for us, I guess.
Is it?
Both of the ones with him have been kind of different.
I think I
don't know what that says
There's
about
a
you.
lot we can cover with you, Ryan. I think
Really?
a true crime one would be really fun with you.
Okay, so what do you
Just
mean by,
dabble.
so when you said true crime, what do you mean by that?
You know, we're not a true crime podcast, but we could be.
We could.
We'll have to
Just
murder you
completely
today.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes. You're like, that's how you could help us the most,
I'm
by
about to
letting us
commit
murder
a true
you.
crime. Yeah.
Yes.
We really did get 1 million listens on that one.
Yeah, that would be your most
Hey
listened
guys,
to.
tune in as we murder Ryan live.
See the door creak shut and lock.
A scream.
Thank you.
No, yeah. So what Ryan's talking about is we really wanted to have him back on again, and I sent out this huge list of possible topics we could cover with Ryan that I knew he would be just really great to have on and talk about, and it was a pretty huge list. It's kind of some surface topics and then some other deep ones, and true crime was on there. But I think I don't know. You always have crazy kind of crime stories, or you're like have like murdery tendencies sometimes, like serial killer tendencies. Have you ever seen his handwriting, Ryan's handwriting?
The super small, very, very teeny tiny.
Yeah, didn't you have a like an analyst guy tell you once?
Yeah, I was working for, it was when I was working for Honda's when I first moved here, and somebody came and brought their car, and then they were describing to me the problem, and I was writing it up, and they were looking at my handwriting, and it was a lady, and she said, "Oh, I'm a handwriting analyst or some kind of deal for NAU. I'm a professor, and that's part of what I do." And I was like, "Oh, really?" And she's like, "Yeah, you have interesting handwriting." And I was like, "Okay, what is it? What about it? What would you say?" She goes, "I would say this is the handwriting of either a public speaker or a serial killer." And so, yeah, she instantly knew that.
And
so then I just looked at her straight face and I was like, "Well, I don't do any public speaking." And then she kind of actually gave me like a kind of a weird look and then like walked away.
Yeah.
So maybe she really believed in it. I don't know.
She probably did.
She probably did.
Give off.
I mean, that's good news. You found your calling. You've got options.
I've got options. Hey, what I could be a serial killer and then speak publicly about it.
Man, he's so multi-talented. Look at how cool that is. And he's here publicly speaking.
And here I am.
Let's stick with that one for today.
Today.
Yeah, please only cover
don't.
that portion.
Please just do the speaking. Yeah.
We keep joking about our last episode, and this one, it really is the last episode.
True.
This is the last one?
Well, I mean, you tell us, really.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll see how good it goes.
Yeah.
Or bad.
Just make sure to publish it, please.
Just please publish it.
Yeah, so...
In a plot twist, people get to hear you guys being murdered.
Oh, that would be great. I'll leave some kind of legacy behind.
Well, sounds great for Steven. I'm going to Can I just wait and see how that one goes, and then we'll see on the
like,
next
"Can I help?"
episode?
Like, I
Can I help
volunteer
you?
tribute.
Anyways, yeah.
So we've had you on before.
Yes.
So if anyone's tuning in right now, go and listen to that one. It's called.
It was so good that we forgot the name.
Let me just pull up our episode. Our 3 episodes we've published.
I think it was about like
can't remember. It
time
was
travel and
Was time travel?
you know,
was the
going back and
Yeah.
I think going back and would you change things if you could go back and
Those
Are you
make
talking
different
about if we
decisions?
can go back and not record that episode?
You probably
maybe?
would.
Yeah.
I really actually did think you were asking a question for a second, but no, that's what the episode was
Yes.
about. Was if we could kind of go back in time.
Yeah, we started with a concept like movies that deal with that, and then it went into more like the moral side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go back and listen to that.
Yeah, or
If
else.
you haven't, if you have,
Or else.
Or else.
I always assume
Ryan's really perfecting his secondary skills now.
Yes.
So
I have this horrible like narcissistic like concept that anytime we're recording, people have just listened to us in sequential order and they're like catching up, and I'm like, yeah, remember guys, the last episode we had Ryan on. I'm like, no,
They're
we
like,
could
who are
have
you?
new listeners,
Yeah.
or they're just popping in for one. But if you haven't heard that one, go back and listen to it.
You can hear me and Steven
It is-
almost getting an argument.
Yeah, it's
it
called
was so close.
Time Travel and Multiverse.
I did my best.
Yeah, Chase really tried. He was poking both sides. No.
Didn't give me good content, guys. Thanks a lot. I was trying to help us out.
Yeah, the clickbaity stuff.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. Steven really wants the juicy, gossipy stuff, but we
You
didn't
know,
get any.
actually, it'd be kind of funny if, like, the image for the episode that I post on social media is like a very clickbaity, kind of on purpose, image.
Oh,
like
that
it should
actually
be
would
of
be.
like, you know, a knife through my head.
Does he
like
kill
Ryan
us?
in the background? Yeah,
You'll never
Yes,
guess what
please.
happens at the end.
Yeah,
It'd be so funny.
please let's do that. Yeah.
Okay,
So this episode is
sponsored by Rainbow Rain Gutters.
we need to have that just on the
Dude,
button.
Yeah.
I can edit it in.
We should.
Yeah,
Put it in.
Mitchell's.
we'll know if he's listening to the
Yeah.
episodes. If he's like, hey, and then he can pay us.
Yeah, Mitch, you owe us.
Yeah, I think that's called extortion.
Tomato.
Potato, tomato.
Potato. Okay, that was cringe.
So, we're still getting our sea legs back under us. Still getting
Yeah.
back into the the professional feel of things of our old stuff, because it was definitely professional. And
Do you feel like that your guys,
quality.
for those that didn't know, right? You guys took a little bit of break
yes,
We did.
in case
yeah.
somebody isn't listening in order. And how do you
Yeah.
feel since you got back? Do you feel revitalized? Do you feel more confused about what you want to do? Less confused?
think
Yes.
yeah, I know what we want to do. I think. And then now it's just kind of like working life back into some sort of way that facilitates it.
Yeah. Yeah, setting aside the time, not only just to record, but I'm assuming to plan,
Yeah.
set up, arrange different things.
Clearly, our setup is lacking.
Very professional.
Yes,
I
that's
like
what I meant to say.
I like it.
We got together, on our last episode, and we kind of talked about
Great recovery. Back on track.
yes, we kind of talked about how we're going to move forward, or hoping to move forward, what we got out of last year's episodes, and I mean, we took a 5-month break, and you thought we would have figured it out by then,
Yeah, that was enough time to plan, think about things, implement.
and it really wasn't.
No.
We didn't do any of that.
We did nothing.
We like got together the day of recording, and we kind of were like, well, let's just talk through it,
So
did.
it was an actual break then.
like a breakup.
No, I mean like a break. Like you didn't think about it. You didn't pick it up. You just took a break.
Steven did a few things, a couple things as far as the
Through social media side,
social media, all that kind of stuff.
follow us at NoXPRec
Yeah,
on X, Twitter,
Twitter?
Twitter
On X.
and Instagram.
and Insta.
They're actually there now.
Insta.
Yeah, but no, so coming back, it's trying to get back to being able to plan out some of the stuff, do some of the research, get some of the guests scheduled. You were gracious enough to, as we scrambled and wrote you like yesterday or day before, like, hey, can you please come on our podcast?
He's like,
I always would want to come on. I think it's fun and super interesting just to have conversations. I can admit I was very just not. I was lacking in ideas of what to talk about and topics, and even the list that you sent over was great. But I was like, okay, how do you start each one? Do you just dive in and see what happens? I don't really draw a blank that often, but I feel like I've been extra like spaced out lately. I'm kind of recovering from being sick, and I feel like my thoughts in my brain are just not back to where they normally are, where I've been like, oh yeah, we can talk about that, and ideas are generating. I feel like I'm generating like zero ideas.
So you think it's mostly because of the cold? Like how long has it been?
It's been about a week and a half now. It's just I feel physically like much, much better, but I feel like mentally I just sit there and space out.
Yeah.
And it's not like I space out into like different thoughts. I just literally will like space off and not think about anything and realize, it's been 10, 15 minutes. I've just been staring.
Yeah, that's unusual for you.
It is not very normal because I feel like I'm always doing something or always preoccupying, especially like my mind, even if it's, I'm not saying I'm active all the time, but always doing something mentally. Mm-hmm. And when I'm done, it's like time to go to bed.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I have to like really push myself to even put thought or anything into what I'm doing. It seems very strange. So I hope it's maybe a fatigue thing.
Yeah.
I don't really know the cause of it. I'm thinking it's just a fatigue thing, that I'm probably more tired than I think that I am, even though I feel good and I don't feel tired. I bet you mentally it's something kind of took a toll. And so like even you sending over like a bunch of ideas and topics or like, hey, what do you want to talk about? I think normally I would be like, oh, I'd be interested in this or this or that, but it's just like blank.
Yeah.
Absolutely blank. So probably a terrible person to have on right now.
It's good. We'll take advantage of the brain damaged person.
Yeah. We'll
there
just,
you go.
No, thank you for coming on. I know you're probably still in recovery mode essentially. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but I could see it on your face that this sickness hit you really hard.
That makes sense. I feel like it wasn't as bad as when I try to describe it. It doesn't feel like it was that bad now that I'm kind of through it. But I think it has had an effect on me that I've never had a sickness have before. Like, I feel like I've actually, like, I know this sounds weird. I hope it's not permanent, but I feel like it's literally like changed like my makeup. Like just mentally and like physically, I feel different. So I hope it's still in the recovery part of it. I mean, most people, I think for most people, they recover. This is normal recovery. I feel like every time I've gotten sick, which is rare, I recover really, really fast. And I don't, have any ill effects even like the next day or a day later, but this is not the case. So I don't know, maybe it's age too.
Maybe
I'm just getting older, and maybe recovery would just take longer if I get ill, or it was just the severity of it. I'm not sure. But yeah, I've had multiple people tell me the same thing, that I like look different even since I've gotten sick. I don't know what it is.
Well, hey, you're on the mend.
Yes.
Hopefully in a week or so or a few days, you start feeling like your old self again.
Yes.
100%. And
hopefully,
we'll have you back on again. Thanks for coming, everyone.
All right. Well, the most listened to episode we just dropped.
I'll tune in to hear Ryan's update on being sick. I'm kidding. No, I
Update.
really.
He died.
The next day.
He really
Ryan
wasn't as recovered as he says he was. So
he was not on the mend.
he was not on the mend.
Narrator.
That disconnect that he was talking about was his soul trying to leave his body. Yeah.
No, I've had a couple times. I think I got sick like right when we finished the house and stuff, or I don't know what it was. It was basically like my body just kind of shut down. Like I finished the house, got into the house, and for like a week, it was that I couldn't really think very well. Couldn't a lot of those things that I normally would be doing. My brain was just not working, and it took some time to just recover and get back to a point where things felt more normal, as quick, as clear. Yeah. So it'll be all right. It's just annoying in the meantime.
It is. It's very annoying not to feel 100%.
Yeah.
Do you think there's been so much sickness around because they're like pumping like sickness into the air?
Just big vats, just big sickness written in Sharpie on the side.
Cartoon. That'd be like a Ren and Stimpy like
Yes.
scene. Like they're just
Like they're loading it
jars
on a
of
plane to go
sickness.
disperse
Yes.
it. Like, no, that's the vanilla vat. You want this one over here. I clearly marked sickness.
Yes.
Yeah, we were dispersing
They
sickness.
spilled it over
The chemtrails.
Yeah.
America.
I don't know what to think of. Like, I really don't know what to think of. If we're either the chemtrail thing, if it would be like, I wouldn't. I'll
I don't
put
even
it
know
this way.
what is the chemtrail thing. I know it's okay, so that is the topic of just kind of having fun today and
Right.
talking about some conspiracy theories and just the interesting points that people have, what we think about them. So, conspiracy theory about chemtrails. What in the world is that about?
Well, I've never really looked deeply into it, but I've worked with people who are very convinced that every time you see these planes fly over, and some of them leave a trail of what looks like steam, smoke. You don't know what it is; it just looks like a cloud. And I've worked with them, and they thought the people that thought that this was the government essentially spreading something in the air, which for nefarious purposes, obviously, would be something good, like, hey, we're going to spread this, this thing that makes you healthy. It was generally like illnesses, sicknesses, whether directly viruses or just like, I've heard like pesticides that would just like weaken our immune system, so then we would catch more things. That's as far as I know about the chemtrail kind of conspiracy. And there was people I worked with that took it extremely seriously. Like they would either go home and from work that day, or like put on like masks with like filters and stuff like that. Like it was pretty serious.
Like doomsday prepper status.
Yeah. And they would kind of get mad at you if you didn't do the same thing. Like you were just kind of like falling in line or being a sheep or whatever it's called. And I guess like the same thing, if I think about it, like the same thing was kind of talked about, in the same kind of attitude is around with like the vaccines and stuff like that. And again, whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, but I think it was the same kind of mentality or thing that would be talked about. You know, some people would say, well, if you're taking the vaccine, you're injecting, you don't know what into your body, which is probably, that's the true side of it. And then there was like the extreme, which is like you're injecting something into your body that was made to, is purposely made to like take you out. And so I think that's where it's kind of hard to find, like, I don't want to say a balance, but hard to find the truth. Or, is it just is what it is. And the consequences of good or bad are just what they are. So.
Yeah, I think it's an effective way to control some of the impulses and thought process around it, is that if you can link some of the opposition or some of the concerns or anything like that to something like conspiracy theory or something that is really on the extreme side, and you're like, you in people's mindset, you link it to that same perspective, it's much easier to be like, oh yeah, that's actually, that's right. I don't want to seem crazy. Like that's too far. But then if it's linked to that, then it's like any sort of critical thought process around it is subdued. And like, then you're like, oh, well, I don't want to be part of that.
I think that's a great point. I think that's why conspiracy theory has become this label or this box that every single critique is thrown into. And there's probably a lot of truth and a lot of things that need to have the critique. But because they, I would say the people maybe in opposition to it would cast the whole thing as this crazy thing, then you kind of lose out on what you could potentially learn that is truthful, because they just make the whole thing seem absolutely crazy, which some of them are.
Yeah.
But I think you kind of like you throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think there's definitely some things that need to be looked at and questioned and critiqued. But if it all gets thrown under the umbrella of crazy conspiracy theory, then you don't question anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember back, this was right before the pandemic, QAnon,
Oh yeah.
just kind of the rise of that. And I remember just kind of really delving into it.
Oh really?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was.
All right. So give a little bit of background what QAnon is, so in case somebody doesn't know.
Well, now.
Go ahead and start at what it was and what it is now.
QAnon was this kind of group essentially who a lot of like multiple conspiracy theories fall under QAnon, right? Like and it's mostly government based. So there's this online presence and obviously physical presence of people, but who kind of had all these theories about the government and, about child sex trafficking and all these kinds of things that a lot of it was rooted in a lot of truth at the time. I think there was a lot of evidence that or enough things to kind of not make it sound so crazy. And it kind of kept building and building. And I think there's like a branch of it now, that believes in like the reptilian, like political people who are reptiles and all that kind of things. But
That's because the lizard people are real, okay?
the lizard people, yes, which is like one of the
question, man.
biggest theories out there.
Why did you make quotation marks?
Yeah, you look offended, Jace.
Why you look so skeptical over there?
Well, I started. So
Wasn't there also part of it was that Trump was Q?
Trump was Q.
Yeah, that Trump
So
was-
there's this. Yeah, there was this whole
And
side
that he
of
was
it.
like in the online presence of just like putting out government secrets.
Right. Yeah, because like some people would claim stuff was leaks or things like that, right? And I mean, a lot of this stuff was based off of like WikiLeaks and all these other things that had become public knowledge, and so they would just kind of build on it. Well, at the time I was my leader at work said, "Hey, you should look into these videos. I think they're super interesting."
No way.
Yeah, and I was like, okay. Well, I would, I was always like taking walks and things like that, and I would just listen to them, and they were on YouTube only at the time. Well, at first I was like, well, some of these sound a little extreme. One of the biggest one was called Pizzagate, and it was this huge conspiracy theory about child traffickers within Hollywood and within the government who traffic children and how they use different terms for boys and girls and things like that. But the more I started listening to it, the more I started realizing kind of just like kind of creepy coincidences. And then YouTube kept taking down the videos. They kept banning the videos. They kept banning the account. And this QAnon group would repost them and then say, watch the video before it gets taken down. And I was like, well, it's kind of weird it's getting taken down. Like, it doesn't have anything necessarily inappropriate or anything. Granted, this is when like misinformation was starting to get, things were being classified as disinformation and they were starting to take things down. And then COVID happened and it kind of fueled it even more. I was really, really into that. And I remember talking to you, Ryan, about it a little bit. And back then, the Epstein stuff started coming up. That was all conspiracy, word of a list, all these crazy things that have essentially been proved now, including, even most recently, the Fauci statement about
The 6 foot.
Yeah.
So you've heard about this?
No, I haven't.
So Fauci came out and said basically the whole 6 foot distancing thing was just arbitrary. And it was made up. There was no science behind it. It was just like, oh yeah, keep a 6 foot distance.
Makes sense.
So,
But you were labeled crazy, right? If you didn't believe that, if you didn't kind of
Oh yeah,
like
absolutely.
subscribe to all those
to
things.
everything.
And
Yeah.
QAnon had also put out that there was emails about the Wuhan lab having leaks and things like this. That was like crazy to even think about until the emails were leaked,
you
right?
banned on a lot of social media
Yeah.
for even mentioning that.
Until the emails were leaked and Fauci had correspondence and that he had also questioned it himself. All these things you were labeled as like crazy or conspiracy that have been proven true or are still being proven true. And granted, I think just like any theory or rumor or ideology can go really extreme. yeah, now, some people are labeled crazy because, you say there's reptiles and holding government office.
Yeah.
And, but I don't know, maybe there is. I'm just kidding.
I think the tactic is to demonize the messenger, so then you don't have to listen to the message. So if you can make the person who's saying the information or giving the information, if you can make them, I don't know, for lack of a better term, evil, they're the bad guy, they're the distrustful one, they're the bigot, they're the racist, they're the all these things,
The crazy.
then you don't have to listen to what they're saying, no matter the amount of truth that what they're saying might have. So if you just demonize the messenger, you don't have to listen to the message. And I think that's done. Obviously, you get into the realm of politics, but I feel like that's done on both sides, and a lot of people just listen to information that already confirms what they want to believe.
Yeah. Confirmation bias.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you have the news source for this side here and the news source for the other side, and they don't listen to the other one because they're just a bunch of liars. But then all of a sudden, if the news is saying what you want them to say, they're not liars anymore. They're the most truthful people. And I feel like people just do themselves a disservice by not saying you have to listen to the other side, but I think it starts with having the thought that maybe you are listening to information that also may not be true.
Yeah.
And maybe just taking that same critique that we have, because some people shut down a conspiracy theory and they say, oh, that's crazy, or that could never happen. But then they're perfectly willing to believe a whole separate conspiracy theory if it follows their built-in belief or ideology.
Yeah.
You could say, oh, there's absolutely proof that votes were, harvested and fake votes were turned in, right? Which is called a conspiracy theory. But then, if there's something to do with,
or if it's the other party claiming
right,
it,
exactly,
then it's believable.
then all of a sudden,
On both
exactly,
sides, right?
exactly. That's the whole
Trump
point. Is like,
bandwagon.
yep.
Yeah.
When you get in that politics side, it just becomes so polarizing that people really don't. I really don't think people care too much for what the actual truth is, and I think that people would rather hear what they want to hear and what they already believe rather than to have what they believe challenged.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's really dangerous.
Right. And I think, it's true. Even when I was listening to these QAnon videos early on, and they were talking about how there was, these huge trafficking rings, and a lot of people in political office are secretly in this or holding, part of it. I was like, that's for sure in the realm of possibility. And then a year later, the Epstein thing blows up, right? Mm-hmm. He kills himself in prison.
Does he?
Yeah, that's another huge conspiracy. And I was like, oh, like just a year ago, I was listening to this conspiracy theory video about how people in power are trafficking under, minors, and now it's true. Now it's been proven true. Maybe not in the exact way they thought or believed, or might not be as extreme.
All the details might
like,
not be exact,
yeah,
right? But there's truth in there.
That was just proved true.
Yep.
So like the realms of possibility of any of these being true are like, all right, well, it's very possible, except for the reptile one. I know that one.
But it's almost like that. Like it's treated like, if somebody would say like, oh, Steven, I saw you, rob a bank on Tuesday. And you're like, okay, this is misinformation. This is conspiracy theory. This is lies. Here's exactly what I was doing on Tuesday. See, this person is evil. This person's malicious. Don't listen to him. In fact, you should block everything they do, all access to media, right? The truth is that you actually robbed on Monday, but you could actually stand in front of everybody and say, see how crazy you are for saying that I robbed that bank on Tuesday. You should be, basically, canceled. And there's like
silenced.
Really, it's what it is. And it's all because you could find a piece of information that may not be right And it's enough to say that's a conspiracy theory. Don't listen to any of it when there may still be truth to it. And you tend to focus on the part the person got wrong instead of maybe what they got right.
True. Yeah, and I think it's a defensive. It's interesting because it kind of all goes back to our original episode of Story and all that. It does depend on who's telling it, who's framing it, how it's framed, and really just battling for, yes, this public perception, which they say perception is reality, right? If you perceive it to be a way, then that's the way that reality is for all intents and purposes. Even though it doesn't change something. Let's say someone did do something terrible, robbed a bank on Monday, but then you're like, hey, I was here on Tuesday, so clearly that is a lie, totally, entirely. And the perception is that that person never did anything, even though they did.
Right. For
all intents and purposes, they did. They didn't do anything wrong, and they lived their life, continued on in the same way.
Yep.
And it was even interesting because I was trying to figure out, I don't know a ton about QAnon or that, I know the basics, but I started like looking, just Googled it real quick. And as I was going through, even myself, I was like, okay, well, I was trying to find some sort of unbiased view of it. And I was like, well, I can't read that, can't read that because it's not going to give me a full picture, which is exactly what is meant to do. It's not meant to, give someone a full picture. It's supposed to disprove. It's supposed to put it in your mind that, oh, hey, this is an untrustworthy source or this or that.
There's always a slant on it.
Exactly. And it very well may be that in some ways they are, or it is an untrustworthy source, but all that should mean is that the claim should be investigated and then each individually taken in isolation and said, okay, no, this one's not true. This one is, this one's not. But people don't do that. People, the same thing that it turned into this big conspiracy theory and this big following of that, oh, it's all true. Everything is true, regardless of how strange or crazy it sounded, all the way up to lizard people. They're real, by the way.
Are you a lizard?
I had to know somehow. But in the same way that there were some valid things that came out but when you're able to, like you're saying, wrap it all up under just like, oh, you can't trust this thing now entirely.
Yeah.
So you might as well not look at these things. Exactly. And what's really interesting is that the same way that I was looking, because it's like official news sources, right? New York Times, Wall Street Journal, AP, all these ones, and they're like, okay, I just know that I'm not going to get an unbiased perspective. That same action that drives a huge portion of their audience to believe them more and buy into what they say and trust because it goes completely against what their perspective is. And they're like, okay, yeah, they're being honest. Also does the opposite to the people who do have skepticism, which then drives this bigger division. Instead of saying, okay, I know that these news sources will sometimes be honest. You're just like, no, you're not even taking things seriously. You're only viewing it this way. So it drives this division completely. And it was an interesting, it was already a much more divided time. And like 2016 definitely changed things as far as a division, as far as how the country kind of split. I think it was just a continuation, but then continued forward. And then the pandemic hit. And all these other things were continually proven right. And even though all these major sources were like, oh, yeah, no, that's not the case, just immediately taking this stuff. And so it continued to divide further and cause this more solidified division where there's less room for having actual conversation about it. And instead it's like, oh, no, you're just here, so you don't even know what you're talking about. And the other person's like, oh, no, you're just coming from here, so you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And
demonizing the other person.
Exactly, yeah.
Instantly without ever hearing anything.
Exactly. And you can't have an honest, objective conversation, which most of the time is worth having and to say, okay, these people are coming from here. So you take some of that information, verified, understand that it comes with a slant, take some from over on this side, and they come with their own slant. And somewhere in the middle, most of the time, there's objective truth, right? It may be over on one side a little bit more, maybe over on the other side a little bit more, but you can kind of work and figure that out.
I wonder if just hearing you say that makes me realize that this is not a political problem.
Yeah.
It just shows itself in politics because that's one of the things that we concern ourselves about in our lives, in at least in a relatively free country.
Yeah.
But I feel like the division between people goes above and beyond just politics. Like we don't just disagree politically.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's like a influence, or there's just a heavy influence of division over just people in general, because the same thing happens in like churches.
Yeah.
Who, you know, I hate to say supposedly, but supposedly believe the same thing, whatever their religion might be. They can't agree upon it, and almost always now, rather than listen to what somebody else thinks, it's just to instantly demonize that person and try to frame them as wrong or misled. And certainly there are wrong people, and there are beliefs, just like there are conspiracy theories, that are wrong.
Yeah.
But what I think still some truth is being thrown out when you just instantly take the person and, okay, do you believe what I believe? And we could say that politically, right? Well, do you believe, you know, and people do that. They give each other a test. Well, what do you believe about this election? Well, what do you believe about this vaccine? Well, what do you believe about this? And they instantly evaluate somebody based upon a few questions.
Yeah.
And then we do that same thing. I think people do that same thing in their belief system, even when it comes to like religion, is well, here's what I believe about my religious system. Do you believe this? Do you believe? And then all of a sudden there's like this like questionnaire, maybe it's just mentally given out. And the moment that somebody doesn't quite, you know, check every box, I feel like they are cast out.
Yeah. Well, it kind of gives you this thing of what you were looking for, almost like a permission to.
Yes. Permission to do that
dismiss,
to them.
kind of like dismiss them, place them in something else.
You put them in a box, and then you don't have to deal with them. If they're over here in this box, and you can put whatever you want. You could put politically, you could put that box as like leftist or right wing. You could put that box as a Trumper. Or you could put that box, you know, you could do whatever you want. But if you put them in that box, then you don't have to deal with them.
Yeah,
you don't have to listen to anything they're saying, because you're telling yourself you already know what it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah,
and then
you no longer have to look at their arguments objectively. You no longer have to assess anything they say as anything other than something.
It could have any shred of truth. It goes back to that, you know, you robbed a bank on a Tuesday. Nothing they said must be true because one little thing is off. And I think we do that as humanity. I think that's really the problem. I think we see it manifest in politics. We see it there because that dominates, you know, media, and it dominates a lot of decision making and legislation and things like that. But that's just one obvious one. I think it's workplaces definitely aren't like they used to be. Workplaces are very, very divided. And then you even go to families that don't necessarily see things the same way. They can be divided, and it becomes almost like you're walking through a minefield just to be around family and have a conversation with them. And it's not because of the politics. It's because I think as people we're allowing ourselves to be divided.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's unfortunate that when people engage in those types of conversations, they're always looking for something to disagree on.
Yes.
As opposed to something
Yes.
that's a good point. Something to agree on.
Only focusing on what they don't agree on.
Right. Yeah, it's like default, right? Yeah. You're going to engage a conversation to automatically try to find what they're going to disagree on, as opposed to, hey, we at least agree on these things. It's going to be, well, what do we disagree on?
And the thing is, I don't think, I mean, maybe I'm being too extreme, but I don't think there's two human beings that probably would ever agree 100% on everything. And I think that's always been the case. I just think that no?
Just kidding.
Oh, that was good.
Point made.
And I think it's always been that way. I just think that we have found our way past it, where we don't agree, and concentrate on things we do agree with to get along as family, brothers, sisters, spouses, friends, community, certainly the more you grow the group of people, the more disagreements are going to be there. And so it takes more effort and it takes more concentration on what you do agree with to become a community. And then, I don't know. I don't even think, I think if you took two people, even if they were married or if they were just like the best of friends, if you just start to dig down far enough, I think you find multiple subjects where they probably stand on the opposite sides of one another. So how can they be friends, or how can they be spouses, or how can they be all these things? It's because they found a way to that those things don't matter as much.
I think it's one of the such a powerful thing that has happened, and it's become this broader thing. Like we're talking about, we've been able to say, oh, so let's say right wing, left wing, and you're going to say the right wing conspiracy theorists, oh, they're just conspiracy theorists, right? So if you're in this pocket, you can be like, oh, they're all the way over here with like flat earthers, or there's, lizard men or whatever. And then over here, you're like, oh, well, you were wrong about so much on this living set, and all you're doing is following, and you're just believing blindly. And so you're just sheep.
Yep.
Right. And you then on any topic, when you can align them with that one thing, then automatically, like you said, it gives you permission to place them there. But it also then is just like, that's why it's such a powerful thing for both sides, is then you can completely control and dismiss anything that they have to say and dismiss them. And you then don't have to, you're like, oh, well, obviously they're wrong and I can't relate to that, because if you relate to that, then you're going to become a part of that, right? You'll be tainted by it. You can be separated. And it is kind of a default, and I don't know if it's all throughout history or something more. So I had a conversation, and it wasn't even like a serious conversation, but it was about whether we landed on the moon, and it was with my mother-in-law. And it was a bad response on my part immediately, because she was like, oh, it didn't happen, and brought up like these things. And I just like rolled my eyes and was like, okay, well, here, let's take a look, and just to show her wrong. But instead of saying, okay, here's what your point is that you're thinking about, and this is something that you're bringing up, and you have a question, or you have this thing, you're like, that doesn't make sense to me. And instead of me just dismissing it, what I could have done was like, okay, hold on, let's take a look at these objectively and say, and what my initial response, which was to roll my eyes and be dismissive, caused her to do was to entrench and just be like, no, this. So then I pulled up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just pulled up this thing. I was like, okay, look, here's how they did this. And she was like, no, I don't believe it. Yeah. And maybe if I would have said, okay, well, that does sound pretty weird at that point in time. And it was about film and like how are they supposed to take pictures or video in there when the current technology of film couldn't withstand the environment of space. And so I was like, okay. I mean, and it does make sense, right? In like 1960s.
I mean, it makes you question.
Exactly.
For sure.
It's like, okay, yes, at that point, nobody had been to space. Why would they have film that did that? But then if you take it to the spec, like, okay, they knew they were going to space, so they're going to work and try and build things that would work in space and do that. And I could have had that approach, but instead, okay, that does make sense at the time. Sure, maybe before that there wasn't those things, but again, they knew they were going to space, so they'd clearly try and put a lot of time and effort to make the most out of it for research and to do that stuff and develop specific technologies that they could use to make the most of it and say, all right, would you want to look at this? But instead, I did that. She just completely rejected any sort of reasonable argument, and so it was like, how am I supposed to actually have a conversation when, and again, it wasn't a serious thing. It was just a representation of what we're talking about okay, here. And so it was an interesting interaction and just funny.
You know, the moon landing is one of those things where I do genuinely feel like it is in the realms of possibility that it didn't happen. I know that there's probably a lot of proof and scientific evidence and reasonings of why they would want to go to the moon, right? They wanted to be the first ones. It was maybe a power thing. It was about showing that our country could do it. Whatever it might have been, I still do feel like it's very much in the realm of possibility that it didn't happen. One question I have is like, okay, so there was like the first steps on the moon. Who set up the camera? Like who filmed that? Was it on, like, is the ship curved around enough to like capture him coming down? Or did they like run out there, set up a camera like influencers do today?
Talking about the famous photo of him jump. I don't actually, I could be wrong on
like
this.
coming down the steps and they're like first steps.
I actually don't think those are the first steps.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think they have been portrayed as the first steps, but I think the first steps that he took were not recorded.
Yeah.
And so I think that's supposed to be a depiction of it because, the obvious question is, well,
So
who's
it's a
filming this?
reenactment.
Almost like because I think they went up and down multiple times.
There were purposes and points for going, which were not limited to, hey, scientific research, but also to show dominance over Russian technology, to do this stuff, to be the first in this whole geopolitical environment. And so to be able to show that and show, and for all intents and purposes, propaganda, right? That, hey, look what we did, and have this full experience for people to be involved in and, have people included. Because it was this huge coalescing and bringing together of the U.S. to be like, yes, we made it to space. We did those things.
Did the flag stay up there?
Yeah.
So if you zoom in with one of those huge telescopes, can you spot it?
They're not powerful enough to see in that great of detail right now.
Have you seen the new Samsung?
That's the selling point.
But they did.
You could see the flag on the moon.
That would be a great selling point.
I'm like,
iPhone
we don't have the
17
technology
maybe.
to zoom in on the moon and see the flag. After 50 years, we went to the moon, but we can't look at the flag from Earth.
So do you believe this is not to label you, put you in your box. I'm just genuinely curious.
Conspiracy theorist with
No. Do you believe
hey Ryan, I need a new co-host. How do you feel about joining?
Between lizard people and moon landings.
Yeah.
What do you believe that we actually went percentage wise? If you had to say X percent believes that we did, and a certain percentage believes that we don't.
I would say I'm 50-50.
Okay, so you're right in the middle.
The only reason is because of QAnon, man. It got to me.
QAnon got you.
Because I'm all those other things that they had brought up, particularly for the QAnon stuff, I was like, well, I mean, yeah, it's possible, until they were proven true. Granted, this hasn't necessarily been proven true, and it's on the flip side, probably more evidence that we did. But I'm I don't know. How do I not know that in 10 years they're going to leak some document that's we staged the moon landing? And I'm that's very possible to me, considering the track record of our government, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That they could have staged it just to be able to get it out quicker. We did it first. It was a power move. Yeah. We did it before Russia, whatever. It's possible. And I just wouldn't put it past our government to have done something like that. But I also wouldn't put it past them to put all resource to it, right, just to be able to actually go up there. I know I've probably gone down on your list 20 notches.
Did you see the disappointment in my face?
I can see it in your face. You're
No,
man,
even.
I used to like this guy. I just think it's very possible. But
no, because the point is that it has to
enough, right, to
yeah. Well, it also has to stem from some sort of that logically makes sense to, especially in something like this, a large amount of people, and why haven't we been back, or those things. And there are reasonable arguments of why that's the case too.
They're there's no reason to go back. We did it. There's no reason to go. But I'm
well, kind of,
we
because,
do stuff to do it just because all the time.
Well, that's true. But it's a massive risk. It would be a massive risk with little return. I mean, they got, let's say hypothetically they did this. Okay, they did it. And they got samples of moon rocks. They got those things. What are they going to do with it at that point? And especially because the cost to go back then was so massive relative to
probably still paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. SpaceX has figured out ways to make things cheaper and to do that. But NASA, and I mean, this is where we'll agree, government is not good at being efficient. They just dump money into things and think that that's the answer to it. And so for them, I forget it cost $1 billion or something to launch every rocket or something like that. Just one, anything to do it, and even more. And it was not reusable. Then there was nothing to take from you. Then you had to start from scratch and go again. And I think SpaceX is they've got it down to $10 million per launch is what it cost them relative to what NASA did it for. And so, yeah. It's
why don't they just build a pulley system, a huge cable that connects from Earth to the moon?
The space elevator.
Yeah, and it just
Because it
trolleys us over there, like a gondola.
It's not in the same spot.
A gondola ride, it just pulls you.
You know what I'm saying? There's not two fixed points.
Gondola of the moon.
Yeah.
So what if you?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
No. Anyway.
Yeah.
Flat Earth.
Just flat Earth. Okay. Here's the whole okay. So what we were just doing is
We could talk about the Earth being square.
Square?
We could. It's about 4 corners. But
I know. What
so
that's
I think
at.
I think what we're missing in like society in general is a deeper and extended version of what we just did, which is dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know. I knew the meaning. I don't want to like misquote it, but I think it's dialogos. I think it's supposed to be through word, through speaking. And
Did you say dialogos?
I'm pretty sure.
Is that just dialogue?
I think that's where dialogue comes from. And I think it comes from the genuine belief that about the logos, about that someone else besides you in all of your wisdom and all of your knowledge, someone else has that same spark in them, has the same ability to be right. I think to engage in dialogue is to believe that fully. And I think that's what we're missing is we don't really, like political sides, religious sides, even down, like I said, to community and family that disagree on things, rarely engage in productive dialogue, I would say. It's not really true dialogue. Like we'll have arguments, but that's not the same. It's just shouting out your point while the other person shouts out their point. There's no receiving information from the other side.
Yeah.
It's just let me get out what I have to say as loud and as many times as I can.
Yeah.
There's not productive dialogue, which means the problem goes deeper is that we really, when we do that, we're actually saying that we are the true like bearers of truth, like individually, which I think is very extremely dangerous to say that you as a human being, you hold the truth. And so what you say is true and anything opposed to that is not true. It essentially is like you've made yourself God.
Have you been talking to my wife?
Huh?
I said, have you been talking to my wife?
Are you a bearer of truth, Chase?
No. Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. Like I'm not saying
steal that from my
I'm not guilty of doing this as well. So I'm not like this like beacon of truth. Example. Yeah, that you should. I realize that I do this. That even if we do it subconsciously, that we don't like that. To me, that word dialogue is like that you are placing in the other person who you disagree with the same value that you give yourself.
Yeah.
And so it would be like you having the argument with yourself and trying to convince yourself. I think if we had an argument with ourselves, we would be a lot more understanding. We would be a lot more listening. We wouldn't easily categorize, but because it's somebody else, it's easy, again, just to demonize them or just say, hey, your opinion doesn't matter. Or, oh, well, you believe this crazy thing. Or, your hair is dyed a different color, whatever it might be that, I really mean that. I don't need to listen to what you're saying. And you actually take away from them that divine part that really every person is made in the image and likeness of God. So every person has the ability to wield the truth the same as you do. Now, whether they do or not, obviously I'm not saying every person's right but I think I think that's why dialogue is so important because you can, and one thing that's really dangerous is even though it's a great tool is media, because media allows you to have a one-way dialogue. Mm-hmm. It's not a dialogue. It allows you one-way communication. It allows you to broadcast without receiving.
That's good. Yeah.
And I think that's to the point of basically also, so we live in a world where media drives everything.
It does.
And then to your point, that's also then how we communicate, going back to the original, is like we're just broadcasting and not receiving. Even if something is coming back, it won't matter. It's like you yelling at your TV is not going to change the broadcast at all.
Yep.
And we do the same thing.
We do it.
We broadcast, and then Stephen comes with flat earth and I just shut off.
Right. Right. Or, you see somebody with a MAGA hat on, or you see somebody with a Black Lives Matter, and you both sides instantly will not receive anything from that person. But they would be just fine broadcasting to them to tell them how wrong they are, how bad they are, how foolish they are, all the different words that we use, but would never receive anything from them. And I'm not advocating the extreme, which is that you listen to everything, because then you don't have any direction. it's not, you don't take in, you don't eat everything because you can. You don't eat poison. You don't eat things that are not edible, but you also, that's the extreme one side. And then the other side is only eating things that you find, it's only eating McDonald's. It's only eating the things you find delicious and that you find, which I don't know why I use McDonald's when I said delicious, because
you just described a diet,
right? But you know what I'm saying. You do that, like, we physically think about that, but we do that like with information. We only receive that thing we want to. It's like, yeah, but it's also good for you to receive things that don't sound good, don't taste good, like a vegetable.
Yeah.
It's good for you to receive information that you may not necessarily agree with, but it actually makes you healthier, and it makes you. Even just the act of receiving it is, I think, what makes you whole. The fact that you will take it from somebody else, because then again, now you're having a dialogue. You are giving that person as much divine spark as you have.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good way of, like, you can have conversation and intake whatever someone has given you, and then, I mean, you're using the body as an example.
Right.
Like, we can't look at, a vegetable and be like, I'm only going to allow my body to, take what's good or this or that. Like, our body naturally does that, right? And that's probably something we have to learn to do with conversation, is like, all right, I'm going to listen to you, and then I'm going to process, and then I'm going to digest and take what I can from it, and then the rest my body's going to discard. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, without just shutting down.
Yeah.
Completely.
And I do believe, like, I really do believe this. I think that if, like, you could see, like think of a political figure that you don't like. And I could just phrase it that way. No matter who's listening to your podcast, they have somebody that maybe they dislike.
Yeah.
Okay. Take that person, and if you had an opportunity to yell and shout at them, your side of it, most people probably would, right? But now, like, sit down in a room with that person as a human being, and there's no cameras, there's nobody, there's just you two people. And I would err on the side of, I'm gonna say, I would bet that most of us would come out with a different view of that person if we did that. I do not think we would demonize them as much as even if the person is bad, even, like, again, think of the worst person. I think if you actually sat down and had a human to human talk, I'm not saying you would both come out of the room and you would agree on everything, but I think you would have a different viewpoint of that person, because you would actually get to know the humanity of that person and realize that maybe as wrong as they are, you could maybe come to see why they believe what they believe and what they're actually trying to get. And I do realize that there are people who are just evil, right? But I don't even know about that. I don't know if there's actual evil people. I think there are people that are instruments of evil, and maybe have lost their humanity, and maybe have lost that, or it's buried, or whatever it might be, by trauma and different things like that. But I still think that, so I don't think that humans necessarily are evil. I think we are vehicles to perform evil things, if that makes sense. But I do think it would be, I don't know. I think it would change a lot. But I don't know if we're so far past this in our, like, culture and our society. I don't see us going back to that, which I think would be the only thing that would really start to repair just society in general. Is that dialogue between people, and realize there's a human being.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think that was kind of what, even a little bit of the conversation of continuing this podcast was, like, because people don't know us, and I joke. I can joke a little bit heavy sometimes. People don't know me, right? I can easily offend, and I get that not everyone might agree with what I say, no matter what. Someone always going to be offended by something, but it's true. I feel like if I had certain audience members that I might disagree with in person, I wouldn't be talking to them the way I heavily joke without having a physical presence in this room with us, other than just us two or us three. I feel like if I had a very diverse audience standing in here with me, I wouldn't be talking that way,
right?
Or joking that heavily with them, right? Because I would probably filter myself a bit more, or I'd be a little bit more cautious on just coming across in a way that I can actually have like a healthy conversation with someone, as opposed to, oh, it doesn't matter, I can say what I want because I don't mean it. I'm just joking, or, you know, I can talk heavy or whatever you want to say. But yeah, it's true. I think if people can just recognize, like, we're all just humans who are, I mean, we're all different. Like, we all have something, a different belief system, something we're going to disagree on. Yeah, I kind of like that you painted that picture of, like, if I was sitting with someone just one-to-one in a room and having an actual conversation, we might still disagree on everything, but I would probably speak to them.
Yeah.
That's not everyone, though, right?
I think you would speak to them different. I think we all would. At least a reasonable. And if you didn't, you would have to then question, are you maybe the evil person?
That's
which none of us are ever. I think naturally we don't ever want to face the question of, are we on the wrong side? I only believe, am I on the right side? And here's all the reasons why I'm on the right side. And I don't think none of us say we don't say we're perfect. And I almost think it's kind of like, oh, well, no one's perfect is kind of a trope that we drag out for ourselves, right? Because we recognize that we have mistakes and we have errors and we go, oh, well, I'm not perfect. But we wouldn't think that about somebody we disagree with. Well, they're not perfect. No, they instantly must be evil, bad, malicious, terrible, all these things, but we don't give them the same grace we give ourselves. And I think that's a big test too. I heard this thing, not to dominate this or take over, but I heard this thing. It was like a really, really, I never heard a interviewer. I won't bring up the interviewer, the person he was interviewing, but he asked him, he said, okay, before we're done with this interview, for this next few minutes, I want you to, and this was a political commentator he was talking to, I want you to steel man the argument that you are of your opponent. And I can explain that, what it means if you don't know. Okay, so what he was telling him to do was, I want you to make the best argument possible if you believed what your opponent believes.
Okay, so like selling what you disagree with.
It's called steel manning it. So straw man would be, oh, well, Chase believes in lizards. He believes in, he believes all this stuff, and start to make up all this stuff to really build up this thing that Chase doesn't believe in.
Straw manning would be the exact example of, he robbed a bank on Tuesday. And it's like, I was here on Tuesday, so clearly the whole thing, that's the straw man. You're taking the weakest point of the argument and blowing that up as if it encompasses
as though it is the argument.
Yeah.
And maybe the person's like, yeah, that's not my argument. So steel manning would be, I'm going to represent this idea. So like, if you just picked an idea that maybe we don't agree on, let's just pick.
Well, even if you took the robbery and you're like, okay, as for the robbery, did I do the robbery? And you're going to make a case against whether the strongest case of whether you did something, and the argument is, okay, I did not do the robbery at all because I have no resources. I have nothing here. This person was with me through this time. You can check the security footage. And it's just continuing that example of like addressing the strongest point of the argument, which is that you either robbed a bank, not that you did it on Monday or Tuesday.
Right. Kind of gaslighty.
Well, that's
part of it.
It'd be like, let's take a topic that we don't need to dig into the topic, but let's say most of the country is split on like the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so to steel man the argument, let's say you didn't believe in taking the vaccine, you would make the best possible argument of why you should take it. And the reason why he did it was, in this interview, and the reason why I thought it was valuable is because if you're going to do that and you're going to do it genuinely and truthfully, it actually forces you to think about what is good and what is true about the argument that the opponent is making, even if not all of it is true, right? Even if it comes down to you don't believe you should, or you don't believe it's healthy, or whatever it might be, you are going to extract out value and truth out of what they're saying because you're now looking at it from a different perspective. And that's what it forces. And I feel like if we did that, like, not to go too deep into this conversation, but we were talking about we're good?
Yeah.
We were talking about this on the religious side, and how there was a group of men who don't agree with each other on doctrine and different things, right? And my suggestion was, rather than them sit in a room and argue their doctrine and pull out the Bible, and everybody's pulling out the same Bible, and they're all arguing from the same source, but yet everybody has a different point of view of it. I said, why don't you suggest to them that they have to steel man the other person's doctrine? And they have to go and take this person's belief that's different from theirs, and they have to make the best possible argument of why it's true, not for their own, but for somebody else's. And we haven't done that yet. Like we haven't, it was an idea and it hasn't actually like come to pass yet. But I really do believe that it's not necessarily that they're right. You don't need to be wishy-washy on your beliefs. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting more us being open to the fact that we are most likely wrong somewhere. That's a fact. Like we are wrong somewhere in our thinking.
And it might not be the belief, right?
Right.
It could
It
be
may not
your
be that.
attitude.
Could be your attitude.
Could be
about
your
it.
approach.
Yes.
It could be your spirit.
Yes.
It could be
absolutely
right.
All those things, right? You may not be wrong on the vaccine. You may not be wrong on what you believe about abortion. You may not be wrong, but maybe the way you go about it isn't right. Maybe there is a small part of it that you don't have all the information, and you're, again, because it's coming from a source that you've already put into a box that they're a crazy person, you don't accept it.
Yeah.
All I think is just an exercise in dialogue. It's an exercise in, I think for a really simple analogy, it is an exercise in walking a mile in somebody else's shoes.
Empathy.
And
I know that was like another topic we were possibly going to talk about today, but yeah, you talking about all of that it comes down to it. It's empathy. And I think grace derives from empathy in a way. Like I think if you can empathize with someone, it's so much easier to have grace for somebody, right? Even if it's someone you completely don't agree with at all. If you can just find like this small degree of empathy for them and just realize how human they are, how whatever they've been through might have shaped their opinion or the way they are.
Experience, trauma, upbringing.
I think grace is, to me, it always comes from a point of like seeing what really matters. It's like you can have a disagreement on doctrine, or you can have this disagreement wherever, but you can debate those and talk about them. But if you're basing your entire judgment off of that person, off of that thing, is that the sole thing that matters to make them a person or a brother, a Christian, a good person, anything else? And we've tricked ourselves into thinking, like, again, going back to the point of like, hey, if they're in this one little thing, they disagree with me, then they are a bad person as a whole.
In whole.
Instead of recognizing, and not that understanding is important, I agree. It's just that it's seeing, is that actually what matters? Is that individual belief in that individual doctrine what truly matters? And in the case of religion or belief, is meeting that doctrine really matters? Is it just like, oh, hey, well, I think that the Bible meant this thing this way? Or is it then going back to the original point, hey, you can talk about that, but that doesn't affect how I see you as a brother or a Christian, because what really matters is that you believe Christ died on the cross for all of our sins, and he died for your sins. You accept him, all of the actual true things of that, and what we believe is that across doctrines, across beliefs, there will be people from all doctrines that it's only because you believe Jesus died for your sins and you truly trust and like you've given your life to him, not that you have this specific revelation on this doctrine or this doctrine that you know what this means in the Bible or what this means.
Right.
And we get caught up in all of those things rather than keeping the core focus of what is truth. And you can take it outside of like, okay, we're all American. We're all supposed to be on this same side in the fact of like what we believe in our value systems and those things, what we want the country to be, even though we aren't. It's not saying you have to then believe that everyone does that, but that's the point that you start from and figure out the objective reality of how a person is.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And I think whether you ever come to an agreement or not is not the point.
Exactly.
The point is that you are willing. Here's the thing. Like, I'm not saying that I'm definitely saying I'm not good at this, or even I don't even know if I'm capable of doing it, but I know it's the truth. I don't think you can ever be actually right until you have the attitude that you're wrong. And that's like one of the hardest things for me, just personality, just the way that I am is not to think I'm wrong. And I don't mean wrong and I don't want it to be like generic. Like I hate when man, that's a strong word, but like, I don't like when myself or someone else says, well, I'm not perfect, as though that's an admission of wrong. Like to me, it's a cop out. Yeah. None of us are perfect. I'm talking about if you really do believe you're wrong, what are you wrong in specifically? Like you were saying, Stephen, maybe it's not necessarily your doctrine. Maybe it's your attitude, right? Maybe it's the way you portrayed it. Maybe it's the way you treated somebody who didn't agree with the doctrine. Maybe your doctrine's just so right on. Maybe your politics are so right on. But it's the way that you treated the person who disagreed with them where you're wrong. Being able to identify that's where you're wrong instead of somebody saying, well, no one's perfect. I mean, I'm not perfect. It's like it's too like low low resolution. It's not, you're not really analyzing where you're wrong. You're just making a generic statement of like, well, nobody's right. Like nobody's perfect. It's like, you don't really think that. You do think you're right when you say that. When you can identify where you're wrong, it means because you're looking for where you're wrong. You're trying to find the flaw in your own argument, in your own truth, if I could put it that way, because your ultimate care is for the truth.
Do you think that's because it should be outcome driven rather than, just being right? Like if your goal is just to be right, but again, you don't care how it is. So I can go to my wife, and we had this the other day of like, I was busy. I was work. I had a few minutes to go over something that we needed to have done. And she was like, yeah, I can do that. And then I came to her and I was like, okay, tell me what happened. And she had made this phone call to figure something out. And she's like, oh, I thought you knew this thing. And I couldn't do that. And so I was like, okay, that doesn't really help us. Here, let me tell you what you need to do. This is the case. And was trying to make sure that she'd be able to do it without me. And even though I was completely right in my assessment, my instructions and all that, I put her off, and she stepped back because I was intense, because I was busy, because I was just like not being upset, but I was just my normal thing when I'm trying to get things done. And just like, here, you need to do this. Here's
how
do you
I would
have
do
that?
it.
Yes. Here's what you're missing. Here's this thing. Here's this thing. And my approach was wrong. And even though it was all correct, if I would have looked at what was trying to have a good outcome, then I would have stepped back and said, okay, how is she going to perceive this? How is this going to help her get this done? But instead I could say, well, then it's not my fault that this didn't happen, that you got this wrong, because I told you exactly what you need to do. And even if it was completely right in there, I was still wrong because the outcome would have been wrong.
Yeah.
And so I had to slow things down from it. I had to take more time and be like, look, that's not where I'm coming from. I'm busy. I'm not coming from a point of frustration or anything like that. I'm just here. And I apologize if it came across that way. I need you to understand that that's not what I meant.
Right.
Here's that. And I then say, okay, how do you feel? Walk me through what you're going to do. Go through and do that. Do you feel good about that? Do you feel confident that you're going to be able to do it? And if our communication were outcome driven, if you're having a conversation about doctrine, what is the point of the outcome of the doctrine? Is it for
to be
everyone?
right?
Yeah. Is it exactly? Is you're just trying to prove your point? And the same thing you're talking about, you steel man to understand. Are you going into a conversation and to find a closer relationship with the brothers? Are you going in to find a closer relationship with God, to see more of Him? Are you, and if you're doing that thing, your approach will be right. Your actual conversation will be right.
I believe that.
Those, and if any of those are wrong, then it doesn't really matter if you're completely right, because the outcome is still wrong, and you're not going to then have a closer relationship with the Lord. You're not going to have a closer relationship with the brothers that you're having a discussion about.
Yes.
And not that there are reasons where sometimes the approach needs to be a specific way. Yes. It may need more intensity here, but the intent still needs to be here, and the aim still needs to be for a good outcome at the end. If at any point your aim changes from the outcome, which is very easy to do with emotion and conversations and topics that are important to you, it's easy to step into like, I just want to be right. I'm right here. I know I am. I have to do here. And suddenly your outcome,
all information that says
even if you started
contrary to that.
Exactly. Even if you started with a good aim on the outcome, all of a sudden you just get a little bit misdirected because you're like, no, you're here. Then you're wrong just the same.
Which is like the literal manifestation of the right spirit will correct the wrong doctrine. The wrong, not the right doctrine will correct the wrong spirit.
Exactly.
It's the right approach.
Exactly.
Will, and which is a statement in itself, because it's like the right spirit will correct the wrong doctrine. It's easy to think if I have the right spirit, I'll correct the wrong doctrine of the other person, right? However, it's always interesting that, like, I've always thought of it that way, but maybe it's the right spirit that I have will correct my wrong doctrine.
Because your doctrine can be the wrong doctrine.
Could be the thing that's wrong.
With the right spirit, same things you're talking about is that if you go in and say, I could be wrong, which is you're going in. And exactly. Okay. You're not just like, I'm going to prove, because you can have this perception that I'm going to prove that my doctrine is right. And you're like, I'm doing it because I love them and I do that. Well, you're not going in.
You can
you're
say
just
your
trying,
approach is one thing, but it really isn't.
Exactly. You don't have the outcome.
You can be nice about it.
Exactly.
That's the whole thing, is like having the right approach does not necessarily mean you're nice. Even though that's a part of it. It's having the mentality of exactly what you said, which is, I think, the mentality that is missing. We see it. That's what I was trying to say. We see it in politics because that's huge. And we see it in media, and we see it, man, you can see it in the comment section of a YouTube video. And then, of course, you see it in churches and religion, because those are core parts of our society.
Exactly.
And that is, I rarely see anybody, myself included, with the genuine, true, and you can't fake it, the genuine, true attitude of, I could be wrong.
Yeah, because you have to truly be open.
You have to believe that. You can't fake that.
Here's what I see. What am I missing? What am I, here's this way. Here's this doctrine here and how it's laid out and how I understand it. And at the end of that, even if you don't come to a resolution, again, the outcome is still,
you should believe you're in a better place.
You should be.
Even
and
if you
they
don't
should
agree.
be. And that you love them more. You have more understanding of where they're at. Even if you disagree, there shouldn't be, if there's more division there in a bad way. If there's more division in a bad way. Because sometimes you do. Like, you may find out through conversation and that somebody's headed down some wrong direction, and you're like, I can't follow that way. And I'll pray for them and love them just as much as I can, but I also can't, like, be with them in this way.
Right. And that's where, I've talked to some people about this, about what we're talking about. And the response was, well, then you're just going to kind of like fall for anything. And you're just going to take in any information because you're so willing to be wrong. And it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with genuinely identifying information that is wrong and saying that it's wrong. There is a such thing as things that are not the truth. As much as there are things that are the truth. There's nothing wrong with identifying the difference between the two and saying this is untruthful information. It's when you tie a person to it and say, because you believe this, or you don't even know if they believe it, but because you have a certain hat on, or because you have a certain shirt on, or because you go to a certain church, or because you do a certain thing, you listen to a certain news thing, you are now associated with a conspiracy theory. And that's when you can start naming it. That. You conflate it all together. It all goes in a box together, and you actually end up losing out on truth that could be there. It's an effective tactic
for appearing to win. But again, if
that's your goal, right, is to win. Goal.
Well, to appear to win, because there's true victory, there's true winning, which is that some sort of progress has been made.
Right. And you won't progress as a person if you're only listening to yourself and you only believe you're right and you're not taking in other information. It would be like saying my diet of McDonald's is the superior diet. I will not eat anything else. And it's like you could be right until it catches up to you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the diet of McDonald's caused some health problem that truth will make itself known. Yeah. And sometimes it's too late for us to do something about it. And it's like you could say the way I believe is right, and it could look like the absolute right thing, and you're prospering and your life is going well and you don't have any problems like that other guy does or that other girl does. And then all of a sudden it catches up.
What's funny is you can also then run and do a thing where both of you could be wrong.
Yeah,
and you're like,
absolutely.
The argument is like, no, you're absolutely nuts. Burger King is the diet that is right.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes,
yeah, it could be a whole new thing that,
Talk about
and I think actually you're right. I think that's a good point. I think that we when I say we, it's like a humanity in general, especially again, if we go into the religious side, I think we're all doing that. We're all saying, nope, this is the diet you must have when and all the diets are wrong. They're just different than someone else's.
I think we definitely got, and for me, got cut up a lot over the last few years. And I think this last couple years has kind of given me a chance to, through all my stuff, give me a chance to kind of separate. We're like, oh yeah, we're conservative, we're this, we're that. And from a Christian perspective, it's like, no, all of this, we're not any of that's not what we are. I'm not a conservative. I'm not like, I should not be here because at the end of that, then it's McDonald's versus Burger King.
Yes, it's what
and you're
it is.
arguing the wrong point entirely.
Yep. I'm only going to listen to Fox News.
Yeah.
It's like, I just don't understand the mentality. It's like, I'm not saying go listen to the other side. I'm just saying maybe have the idea that your diet of information is also just as bad. And you're only being fed things that make you go, yeah, okay, yeah, and rile you up. And it's like, it's being selectively fed to us information. Again, going back to like the conspiracy theory, and anything beyond what you selectively are being fed information must be wild, crazy conspiracy theory. It must be that.
And on that side, you actually, from let's say conservatives, because that's the part where we kind of I think we get caught up in is that we look at it as, yes, at the very base layer of that, what started with that was that having similar values to what we have, right? Yeah. It was a Judeo-Christian value system that was built up. So it's easy for us to not look at that and again, not even conflate somebody else, but conflate that with our own system and ignore the points where that has gone off the rails and be like, okay, well, it's still at the base, right? It's still conservative. It's fine. Those are just things and we ignore it.
It's progressed.
Exactly. We're just like, oh yeah, no. It's fine. That's really not, they're still conservative, right? They're still against this and they're still for this and they're still for Second Amendment freedom of speech and they're still for whatever. Right. And we're like, yeah, that's true.
But we've budged.
Exactly. And as soon as you start doing, and again, Burger King and McDonald's, when that's the completely wrong argument, as from a Christian perspective, if you're not a Christian or you're not that, then that value system is what you have and you're trying to claim that. But when it's not a Christian value system, there's no point to actually stick with the value system. That value system can evolve. And that's where we're fortunate to have this, but we just lose sight of that in that anything that departs from our Christian value system is wrong, right? And it's harmful for reasons of like, it is bad, it is negative, it has negative repercussions on society itself, even if it's on the quote unquote conservative side.
Right.
Like,
That makes sense. Because I think it goes, it continues to like dig in deeper, which is why I say it's like an influence or a spirit of division rather than the topic itself, right? Because within now Christianity, you could dig deeper into that and say, okay, there's belief systems within Christianity. And then, we have our belief system. And then within that one, there's division. Like if you don't agree, if you don't think of this specific belief system that we both say we believe exactly like I do, you must be wrong. All of a sudden it's not even about conservative and it's not even somebody who's so far on the other side. They just slightly differed from you in one little thing. Oh, you don't go to the movies, or oh, you do go to the movies, or oh, your songs sound like this. Oh, well, they don't sound like this. All of a sudden, like we're splitting hairs.
Yeah. Oh, you have drums in your
you have drums and you don't. Oh, you have a 15-minute service before, and you should only have 10. It's like all of a sudden we're like literally splitting hairs and finding reasons to divide people in churches over like. I want to say I want to use the word silly like very carefully because again, there's a right way and there's a truthful way, but
you're making small things into like absolutes.
You're making them into absolutes. And the point is not because, again, you would give grace to yourself in some of those things.
Yeah. You know that if you go and you like mess up and something like, oh man, of course I'm human. Thank you Lord for your grace.
Exactly. All of a sudden it's like, no one's perfect, but when it's that other guy, it's like, oh, he's off. He's this and that. And it's like, I have like been in that and have done that and been guilty of it and still battle that. But I could say that I'm so tired of that type of division that it's so like everything you see going on in politics in the world is just a magnified view of that. Yeah. It's still going on. It's like we're splitting let's split this church of 300 into 150.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you could find positives for why that's okay. But then the 150s both split into 75, 75, and then those split. And then pretty soon we will have 100 churches of one person.
Hey, Ryan, Steven, whose house are we doing this at this Sunday?
Eventually, if time went on long enough, we'll have, instead of having one church of 100 people, we'll have 100 churches of one person.
Yeah.
And even then, really that's what we're saying is like, we're the only person who has the truth. That's what I was talking about before, is really what that says is I am the only one that really, and like, think about the narcissistic, like the prideful spirit to say, I am the only one who really knows and has the truth and follows it. Like but yet that is actually the battle that we have to battle.
Yeah. I think I was talking, I forget the context of the conversation, but I was like, so many of the things that we go through are a luxury, and it sounds strange when I frame it as like a luxury, but if our lives were so hard and difficult that stuff, we didn't have the capacity and the time to focus and hone in on some of these, like you're saying, splitting hairs, and we're like this or this, and not that you shouldn't watch things, not that you shouldn't.
Doesn't mean you let everything in either. Yeah, it's not that you don't go to the opposite extreme.
Exactly, but to then win those things, like our struggles and trials are so small and minor that this is what we are focusing on instead of something big, and it's an intention of this time. Like everything is so easy. Up until the last,
think it's because we really haven't had.
We don't have no real struggle.
Yeah,
and we're like
persecution.
Oh, well, yeah, exactly. Well, just and even normal struggles, like I have time.
Speak for yourself, Chase. Just kidding.
Over the last a little bit, I was so caught up in politics during before a lot of stuff, and I tried to intentionally step away from it because I realized it was bad for me. But over the last year and a half, I didn't have time or capacity to worry about, because I had real issues in my life that really affected me.
Mattered.
Yes, that were like, okay, if I don't do these things, my family will suffer. I will suffer. And now we're like, oh man, well, this person in this radio show is saying this, or this, this person said this one little thing, and this person said, I mean, okay, I hope they're fine. Like, people can say, well, I had things come up and it was like, this person said you looked at him this way, right? You gave him a judgmental look, and I was like, I don't even remember that it's not me. I understand people go through things. It's not a judgmental look. It was probably me noticing and being like, oh, okay, I hope they're okay. And that was it. But I also was like, I don't have time to be bothered that there's this person saying this thing about me. I just don't. Yeah. And I don't want to either. Because at that point, it was like, I don't want to. I just hope that, hey, I hope they're okay. If there's anything I can do, I hope I can help them. Right now, I have to go grind my floors for 6 hours because I got to go make sure that we can get this done on time. And at that point, but before that time, people get caught up and they're like, oh, they said that. And they thought, I was like, no, I don't have that. Oh, she shouldn't have been doing that.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
because we don't have enough going on.
Exactly.
So where that becomes the new crisis.
That was the thing. Oh, well, she's heading this and she's doing that, which would feed into the problem at that core of that specific issue. But I also, me not stepping in and be like, okay. And I was just having a conversation with them. I was like, okay, don't worry about it. Right. I don't care if she said that. That's not true. I know that's not true. I hope. I'm sorry if that came across. If she wants to talk or somebody has an issue, come talk to me.
Right.
But if it's not big enough to do that, I'm not going to tell anybody else. I didn't say anything about anything. It came up because this person had said something to somebody else. I didn't tell anybody I had seen this person doing this thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, it didn't. I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have come up.
It's like splitting hairs, right? Yeah. It's like turning a little tiny thing and making it into this huge situation.
And there was just no capacity for it. Our lives are easy enough to where that could have been the focus of this huge dramatic thing. And I didn't have time for it. I wouldn't want to anyways. But it was a true recognition that I don't have, we live such a luxurious life.
Yeah, that's what it is.
It's a luxury to be able to do that.
It's like if you were, I don't know, my mind goes to if you were chained up in the same prison with somebody, you're not going to care the way they looked at you, or you're not going to care about, how long their song service is.
Yeah.
you know, and it's because we have a, you know what I'm saying?
You're in prison. You're like, hey, I know you're singing, but
Yeah.
that's the 15 minutes there.
Yeah,
You've had three
it,
songs.
right? It's
time
because
to
you're
move
now
on.
in it together, and you're in a crisis. You're in a an actual persecution or battle.
Yeah.
Like, and we are in a battle in a sense, but like we're not. If we exhibit behaviors that are like what you just described, we're actually saying that we're really not in the battle that we're supposed to be in.
Exactly.
We're not really in a crisis that we say that we're supposed to be in. We're in good times.
Well, we're distracted, even if there is something we should be addressing, which most of the time the stuff that we deal with is more subtle now. There's a lot more subtlety to it. There's less of the in their face, because in the face stuff, it's like you have to deal with that or something really bad will happen.
Right.
That's the true danger of a lot of our stuff these days, is that it is so small and subtle and stuff that then it just pulls you off into these weird things, and not like, oh, well, I'm going to lose my house or I'm going to lose everything I have. It's like, oh, well, all of a sudden you got jealous, and then you decided that because you got jealous, you didn't like that person in the church. So then you step back a little bit away, and then you think everyone's starting and they're all spreading. And so then you step back entirely. Well, I'll just go see, I don't want to be like these people, so I'm just going to live in the world.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you're just off living an entire life. Like it's just this very subtle track that you can get pulled into easily. Yeah. And there's nothing even bad. And then you're living in this world. You're like, oh, this isn't so bad. Again, it's not like you're off in some mud pit somewhere, even though spiritually you may be.
Right.
But you're just like, oh, this is fine. I'm living a good life. You can have everything you need here. It's not like you step out and then you are in a true crisis, like what we view as a crisis, even if it may be a spiritual crisis. But you don't have to face that.
I'm like, people are in a spiritual crisis in church.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like people are in the mud pit in church, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't even have to step out of the church to be in horrible shape. Like, and I think that's the sad part of letting those little things slip in, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's the influence of a divisiveness
Yes,
that
absolutely.
I'm talking about. It's
And
divide and conquer. It's sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. Yeah.
The point of it is I think ultimately the point of it is to get, and we see it working in the political world and the media world. And again, go on Twitter, go on the comment section. The point of it is to isolate every single person into by themselves, because then they can be conquered. And there's a little bit of a paradox, because one, we must be individually strong enough to withstand that. And second of all, are also called to be part of a body, but the body is made up of people who individually are strong. They're not, and yes, we have our weaknesses because we are human, but that's where being with someone who cares more about you than they do about being right is there to cover your weakness. And because certainly, Stephen sees my weaknesses being around me. Stephen might see Chases might see Stephen's, vice versa, all these things, right? We see them, but what do you do about that? Yeah. Now, if you want to be right, if you want to win the argument, well, you'll point out where they're wrong, and guess what? By simple comparison, you are now more right. Yeah. But if our attitude is that we are not right but wrong, it would be, well, then he needs somebody, he needs help with that. He needs somebody, rather than go talk about that and expose that, he needs that covered up. Yeah. I can do that. Covered up like sweep it under the rug.
No. Just like, okay, I'm going to go pray about that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go to battle for him because he may or may not see that weakness, or maybe it's a weakness and he doesn't know how to deal with it. I'm going to go cover that up. Maybe maybe it's, and that's really easy to say, but that's very, very hard to do, I think, because it goes against
outcome focused.
Yes.
It shifts the perspective to something down. Like humans are not good at seeing outside what's in their immediate surrounding, their immediate environment. So to do that, you have to look at further down the road. Yes. You have to look at that actual outcome.
What is good for the whole. Yeah. Not what is necessarily good for you. Yeah. Because again, all of a sudden that is now placing in someone else the same divinity that you believe you have.
Well, you've decided
you have the same value.
You could be, let's say somebody is struggling with something, and suddenly you decide, okay, that person needs to be cut out because they could be a cancer, they could be this thing. Mm-hmm. Well, you just completely, so to do that, you're right, and you think you're doing it under protection or anything like that. And not that you want to let everything in, but you could also be making yourself a decider of who is in and who is out instead of
very
saying
dangerous.
exactly, yeah. Like that's where it's not, oh, well, hey, that thing is wrong. So let's just cut that out there so to make sure it doesn't corrupt or infect anything else.
We do that in society right now.
Yeah.
So if not even the religious side, again in society, if you wear this hat or this shirt, you should not be part of this country,
like,
this society, this anything. I mean, literally, sometimes a piece of clothing is enough for somebody to go, I already know what you are. I already know what you're about. You should be cut out.
Yeah.
And they do it.
Yeah. Steven, what do you think? I was actually surprised to hear your voice for a second. I was like, oh, yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, why? Have I not been talking?
Steven, because
feel like
Ryan
I
and I were just like
dominated.
back and
Oh,
forth.
Yeah, I feel like
I'm
I've been
enjoying
dominated.
this. This is nice. This is what my role should be permanently.
No,
I
that's
should
not
sit
at
here,
all.
control the soundboard,
Stop.
and it's so nice not to like give my opinion sometimes.
Okay, well, now give your opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now on demand.
On demand, right
See,
now. Wrong.
see.
All right. Do you remember being cut off? Just
Well, I
unplug the
disagree completely with both of you.
It's okay to be wrong.
It's,
I'm just kidding.
It's okay to be wrong. It's okay.
nobody's perfect.
Nobody, hey,
Nobody's
you know what?
perfect.
I'm not perfect.
I'm not perfect either.
yeah.
In this instance, I am. But you know, I've had my
right now I
times.
am, but no, let's hear it.
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay.
I'm just like agreeing and nodding my head and
And the evolution of this conversation, though.
yeah, I know it went from conspiracy theory to like
This is why I was so excited to have you on. I knew
sorry.
it couldn't just. No, I knew it couldn't just stay
Sidetracked.
like.
We're down a sidetrack
yeah, I know
and
you
never
were over
came
here
back.
like wanting some surface conversation, and now we're like deep in the.
No, I just like organic, genuine conversation is good. Yeah.
Exactly.
Organic. I don't believe in organic, but
Free range conversation.
free range,
Yeah.
cage free.
I like
Grass-fed
No,
conversation.
caged, chemicaled up. That's me.
Oh yeah,
Just
okay. You like them steroids?
yeah.
that,
My eggs better be bleached and loaded with what is it? HGH.
HD.
I do love a bleached egg.
Bleached egg.
When you get those organic eggs that you crack open, there's like a little chunk of flesh or something in the middle.
With a little
You're
spot
like,
on it.
Yeah, and I'm like, was that going to be a bird?
Yeah. Yes.
No.
Yeah. But we did stray from conspiracy theory.
No,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. That's exactly
was
what
nice, yeah.
that was the plan, I think. I think you said, let's start.
We came in without a
Somewhere.
plan, and it was actually really nice to like just go into a genuine interest of a part of the
Flow.
conversation.
Hopefully people are.
This is going to be a roller coaster for people if they listen to this.
Yeah,
They're
they're
gonna
like,
be
this is okay.
wait a minute.
Boy, is that guy wrong.
It's the who is it? The the kombucha girl.
Oh, she's like,
Well,
This
Yeah.
conversation was that,
Yeah.
essentially. It was that.
funny.
oh, well. Oh man, no, that was really good. I enjoyed that a lot.
There's just so much that.
Okay, you do want to say something.
No,
Let's hear it.
no, not say something. I'm saying there's so much you can just build upon with everything we've talked about today. It's like I almost felt like we could have done a part 2.
Oh, we definitely could.
We start part 2 with empathy, because we kind of sidetracked that.
There is a whole nother side to that, an aspect that we say you can't, where do you cut that off? How do you balance that
Toxic
out?
empathy.
Yes.
Sure, yeah. Like
Yeah.
where you let things in and what's the point that you do and don't.
You're right. There is a balance to it, because that would be an interesting part 2, because
think
you
I-
cannot let everything in.
Yeah, I have to chew on that one a little bit.
Right.
But you can
Before-
try.
Yeah. I mean, you go back
It's
to the
really easy
diet,
to let
right?
it all in.
All McDonald's, bad. But eating every single thing that there is, also bad.
I kind of resent you for making me take the frame. I actually don't resent you. I resent myself for choosing Burger King as my.
I know.
It's
What
like,
were
why
you
not
doing?
In-N-Out
In-N-Out or something
actually
better.
good?
Yeah.
Well,
Burger
the
King.
point was to find something that was equally.
It was,
Yeah,
but I
because
never.
In-N-Out's amazing.
I
If
never
your
would.
diet
I'm a
spiritually
McDonald's
If
and
your
was
Burger
just
King.
spiritual diet is
In-N-Out,
only
is In-N-Out.
in and out of church, just
Oh gosh,
You're good.
yeah.
Well,
no, just anytime I have to side with Burger, because actually Burger King is probably like my on the bottom.
Oh, is it
That's
below
the bottom
McDonald's?
of that.
Oh, yeah.
This is a whole
You have
other
a
subject,
list.
which we never talked about food as much as we talk about food.
I know.
We've never actually.
We talk
had
about food way
that
more
be-
than
I'm
we
scared
get
to
into.
talk about
Every
food
person
around
that is
Chase.
listening to the podcast, their stomach just starts growling. We just start talking about food. So Burger King's
like,
on the bottom with you.
It's on
You
the
don't talk about
bottom?
food with me.
No.
You really, really don't. It's mostly when we're around You
Yeah,
not
sorry.
talking about food.
Everybody that
I
knows
get
me
like
knows
nervous.
it always
I'm
goes
like,
to food.
I have this like fear that because I'm a Burger King guy, that's like my top fast food place. Yeah.
It better not be.
So just another reason for him to like notch me down on his list.
This is no,
I was
it's a
joking
truly
about
diverse,
I was
diverse
joking about
podcast.
notching you down before, but now I'm
No,
Yeah, I
there's no
know.
joke.
That's why I don't talk about food with Chase.
You could say the moon landing was fake, but Burger
How
King.
dare you?
the Earth is. I will agree with you. The Earth is flat. Before I agree that Burger King is
Yeah.
anywhere above any other restaurant.
No, I would say
Carl's Jr. I agree.
down there.
No, Carl's Jr. is
Oh,
pretty high up for me.
That's definitely higher than McDonald's and Burger King. I don't like McDonald's. Like it's right there close to Burger King.
Yeah,
I would say like Long John Silver's is probably the bottom.
that's not food though. I feel like that's just oil.
Yeah, that's just.
Just
yeah,
I feel like that's
nobody likes to
substance. I
just
feel like
eat-
it's breadcrumbs and
Yeah,
grease.
nobody just likes to eat physical grease. Just like
Yeah,
balls
that's like
of grease.
eating a sponge made of
it
grease.
really is.
I don't know if I have a list. I probably should. That's probably why I looked the way
I don't
look.
have one tracked. I just have like this instinctive gut feel.
Subconscious,
Yeah, of
like,
like
steer-
no, that's below
Stay
that.
away from here.
It's like hungry, more hungry, desperate.
What a
Yeah.
luxury!
I hate
I'll
myself.
starve to death
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, there's different levels of eating. Yeah.
Yeah,
always
I
goes
mean,
back to
there's
food
places I don't
if
care
I'm
to go
around.
to, but I'm like anything goes. I'll eat anything. I've been a Burger King probably in the last year, so
McDonald's apple pies, I'll give them that.
McDonald's fries. Like sometimes I crave a McDonald's fry. Like I just, you know,
What's the one food? Could you identify one? I already know what mine is, so it's an easy question. What's the one food that you know there is zero good justification to eat it at all? It is when you're eating it, you realize that it's the worst thing in the world for you to eat, but you like it.
oh,
I already know what my item is.
That could be a lot of things.
Those cherry pies from
gas station.
the gas station. You know,
Oh,
the little,
yeah,
the little
like the
pastry.
Hostess
Yeah, the
ones?
Hostess like folded over, looks like a pita or like
Yeah.
a Hot Pocket. They're genuinely so bad. Like if you could manufacture
Is it
was a
like-
food, it would be that.
Is it like the actual Hostess ones, or is it the ones
Anyway,
that
any of
It's,
them.
it's not the Hostess ones. I think
It's
the ones
like
you
the-
like is the
they've got the
little-
brown wrapping on them? And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Actually, those ones are like I love the bear claws
Okay.
from those same ones.
When I eat it, I'm like, this is literally killing me.
Yeah,
Like I could actually feel years coming off my life, but I enjoy it so much.
I could say that about like pixie sticks.
Okay. Yours is pixie sticks?
Well, it's just one of those
literally
things that
sugar.
you're
just
literally just
pouring
dumping
sugar into
sugar
okay.
down.
That's fair. I never thought of pixie sticks, but that's good. Steven?
probably fast food as much as I eat.
Nah,
it.
like specific though.
I don't know. Like I said, I eat everything.
What's that one item that it's just guilt, but you love it anyways? That guilt
That's
item
me
that
all
you
the
know.
time.
Oh,
I feel like a corn dog has that.
Really?
corn
It's
dog?
just like
I eat that so good for you.